The text message glowed on my phone screen like a neon sign in a dive bar window. I'm not going to report on where I spend my time. My name is Lucas Mitchell, and I'm an architect. I design buildings that last forever, relationships that crumble in months, and revenge plots that would make Machiavelli weep with pride. At 38, I thought I had life figured out. Turns out, I was just getting started on the real blueprints. I stared at Vanessa's message from my cluttered home office, surrounded by half-finished building plans and empty whiskey bottles that had become my closest companions. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days creating structures while my marriage collapsed like a house built on quicksand. "There's no need," I typed back, my fingers steady despite the rage building in my chest like steam in a pressure cooker. But there was a need. A desperate, consuming need to know exactly where my wife of 15 years was spending her evenings when she claimed to be showing houses to difficult clients. Our city, a gritty, mid-sized northeastern town where everyone knows everyone's dirty laundry, had become my hunting ground. I'd installed a tracking app on our shared phone plan months ago. Call it paranoia, call it intuition. But when your wife starts wearing perfume to grocery store runs and receives mysterious calls that send her giggling into the bathroom, you develop certain skills. The red dot on my phone showed Vanessa at Chez Laurent, the trendy bistro downtown where appetizers cost more than most people's hourly wage. She wasn't showing any house. She was showing herself to someone else. I'd been gathering evidence for 3 weeks, like a detective building a murder case. Credit card receipts from hotels during her client meetings, location data showing her at restaurants across town, Instagram photos from mutual friends where I could spot her laughing with Ethan Blackwood in the background, her colleague from the real estate office, married with 2 kids, driving a BMW that screamed midlife crisis louder than an air raid siren. My hands shook as I printed everything: bank statements, phone records, photographs I'd taken from a distance. The manila envelope grew thick with betrayal, each piece of paper another nail in the coffin of our marriage. The drive to Chez Laurent took 12 minutes. 12 minutes to transform from Lucas the architect into Lucas the avenging angel. I parked across the street and spotted them through the window. Vanessa in her red dress, the one she'd claimed was too fancy for anywhere we go, leaning across the table toward Ethan like a teenager on her first date. I walked into that restaurant like I owned the place, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The hostess started to approach me, but something in my expression made her step back. Smart girl. Vanessa saw me first. Her face went through more color changes than a chameleon having a seizure: red, white, green, and finally settling on a pale shade of terror. Ethan turned around, his perfectly styled hair catching the light, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to pure panic. I dropped the manila envelope on their table with a sound like a judge's gavel. The wine glasses rattled. Vanessa's hand trembled as she reached for it, her wedding ring catching the candlelight like a tiny spotlight, highlighting her guilt. 15 years of marriage, I said, my voice steady and cold as winter concrete. 3 weeks of evidence. Enjoy your dinner. It's the last meal you'll ever share. I turned and walked out, leaving them with their appetizers and their shame. Behind me, I heard Vanessa's voice crack as she called my name, but I didn't look back. Architects don't admire buildings while they're still demolishing them. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. with the clarity that only comes from righteous fury and too much coffee. Vanessa hadn't come home. Good. It saved me the trouble of watching her practice lies in the bathroom mirror. I'd already prepared the divorce papers, one advantage of having lawyer friends who owe you favors. I'd also called the bank and frozen our joint accounts, leaving only her personal checking account active. Let her explain to Ethan why she couldn't split the check anymore. When she finally slunk through the front door at 7:30, still wearing yesterday's red dress like a scarlet letter, she found the papers waiting on the kitchen counter, next to her deactivated credit cards. "Lucas, we need to talk," she started, but I held up my hand. "We needed to talk 3 weeks ago. Now we need lawyers." She picked up the divorce papers with shaking hands, scanning the terms I'd carefully crafted. Adultery, irreconcilable differences, division of assets that heavily favored the faithful spouse. "You can't do this," she whispered. I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine expression I'd worn in months. "Checkmate, Vanessa. But this is just the opening move." Word travels fast in our town, especially when it involves closeness, betrayal, and public humiliation. By noon, half the city knew that Lucas Mitchell had caught his wife cheating and served her divorce papers colder than yesterday's coffee. I discovered this when 3 potential clients canceled their appointments within an hour. Apparently, hiring an architect whose wife found him so insufferable she had to seek comfort elsewhere wasn't good for property values. The first call came from Margaret Hendricks, a wealthy widow who'd been planning to build her dream retirement home. "Lucas, dear, I think we should postpone our project indefinitely," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You understand, with everything you're going through, perhaps you need time to focus on personal matters." Translation: I don't want the architect of my dream house to be the same man whose wife preferred another man's blueprint. The second cancellation stung worse. Jim Crawford, my college buddy, called to back out of designing his new office building. "Look, man, it's not personal," Jim said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "It's just that Vanessa's been talking to people, and some of the stories she's telling, they make you sound pretty controlling, maybe even unstable." "What stories?" I asked, though I could already feel the trap closing around me. "She's saying you've been tracking her, going through her phone, following her around town. That's not normal behavior, Lucas. That's stalker territory." I hung up without another word. Vanessa wasn't just defending herself. She was launching a counteroffensive, painting me as the villain in our story. The cheated-on husband becomes the controlling psychopath. The betrayed spouse becomes the abuser. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic kind of way. By evening, I needed a drink and some perspective. The Quarry, our local sports bar, had been my refuge since college. Kyle Morrison, my old boxing teammate, ran the place now. If anyone would give me straight talk, it was Kyle. The bar was busier than usual for a Wednesday night. I grabbed a stool at the far end, ordered a whiskey, and tried to ignore the whispers and glances from other patrons. Small-town gossip was like wildfire. It consumed everything in its path and left nothing but ash. "Rough day?" Kyle asked, sliding my drink across the scarred wooden bar. "Getting rougher by the hour." Kyle nodded. He was one of those rare friends who understood that sometimes a man needed to drink in silence. But my silence was shattered when Ethan Blackwood walked through the door like he owned the place. He looked different than he had at the restaurant, more confident, cocky even. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored, his hair styled like he'd just stepped out of a magazine. He ordered a craft beer and made a show of checking his phone, probably texting my wife. I should have left. Should have finished my drink and gone home to plot my next move in private. Instead, I found myself walking over to where Ethan stood, my whiskey glass still in my hand. "Enjoying your evening?" I asked. Ethan turned, and for a moment I saw fear flicker across his features. Then his expression hardened into something resembling arrogance. "Lucas, I was hoping we could talk like adults about this situation." "Adults?" I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. "Adults don't sleep with married women. Adults don't destroy families for sport." "Your marriage was already over," Ethan said, his voice rising slightly. "Vanessa told me how miserable she was, how cold and controlling you'd become. I didn't steal her from you, I rescued her." The whiskey glass was in my hand one moment and flying toward the wall the next. It exploded against the brick, sending amber liquid and glass shards across the floor. The bar went silent. "You want to rescue someone?" I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. Rescue yourself, because if you think I'm cold now, you haven't seen anything yet. Ethan pushed me, and I pushed back harder. He stumbled, caught himself against a table, and came back swinging. His fist caught me in the shoulder, but I'd been boxing since high school. I grabbed his wrist, twisted, and watched him drop to one knee. Enough! Kyle's voice boomed across the bar as he vaulted over the counter. He grabbed my arm, pulling me back before I could do something that would require bail money. You're both out, Kyle announced. Now! Ethan scrambled to his feet, straightening his jacket and trying to salvage his dignity. This isn't over, he said. No, I agreed. It's just beginning. Kyle walked me to my car, his hand heavy on my shoulder. You want payback? He asked quietly. Make it hurt, not messy. Prison orange isn't your color. I drove home through empty streets, Kyle's words echoing in my mind. He was right. Physical violence was satisfying but temporary. Real revenge required patience, planning, and precision, the same skills I used to design buildings. That night, I sat in my office and began sketching. Not buildings this time, but a blueprint for destruction. Vanessa wanted to play games. She'd chosen the wrong opponent. I was an architect of structures, but I could just as easily become an architect of ruins. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife says you're dangerous. Maybe she's right. I smiled and typed back, You have no idea. The war began in earnest the next morning. If Vanessa wanted to paint me as the villain, I'd give her a performance worthy of an Oscar. But first, I needed intelligence. Samantha Torres had been Vanessa's best friend since college. One of those relationships that survive marriages, divorces, and decades of accumulated secrets. If anyone knew the full scope of Vanessa's betrayal, it was Samantha. I found her at the coffee shop, where she held court every morning, dispensing advice and gossip with equal enthusiasm. Samantha was the kind of woman who collected other people's secrets, like some people collected stamps, and she wielded information like a weapon. Lucas! She called out when she saw me, her voice dripping with false concern. How are you holding up? This must be so difficult. I sat down across from her, noting how her eyes gleamed with anticipation. She wanted details, wanted to be the first to hear my side of the story, so she could dissect it later with her other friends. I'm managing, I said, though I have to admit, I'm confused about some things. Maybe you can help me understand. Samantha leaned forward eagerly. Of course. What do you want to know? How long have you known about Ethan? The question hit her like a slap. Her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips, and I watched her mental gears grinding as she tried to formulate a response that wouldn't implicate her in the conspiracy. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. You've been covering for Vanessa for months. All those girls' nights out that were actually hotel visits. All those shopping trips that ended at restaurants across town. You've been her alibi, haven't you? Samantha's face flushed red. Vanessa needed support. She was unhappy, and you were so distant, so cold. What was she supposed to do? She was supposed to talk to her husband. She was supposed to try counseling. She was supposed to do literally anything except sleep with another married man. You don't understand what it's like, Samantha said, her voice rising. Being married to someone who treats you like a roommate instead of a wife. Vanessa felt invisible in her own marriage. I stood up, leaning over the table until my face was inches from hers. And now she's about to discover what actually being invisible feels like. I left Samantha sitting there with her mouth hanging open and her coffee growing cold. The first phase of my plan was already in motion. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls that would reshape the battlefield. The first was to Jennifer Blackwood, Ethan's wife. I'd found her number in the phone book, old school but effective. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding harried and tired. Mrs. Blackwood, this is Lucas Mitchell. I think we need to talk about our spouses. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I was wondering when someone would call. We met at a diner on the other side of town, away from prying eyes and gossiping tongues. Jennifer was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the exhausted look of a woman trying to hold her family together with willpower and caffeine. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3 months, she said, stirring her coffee with mechanical precision. Maybe longer. The late meetings, the new clothes, the way he started working out again, all the classic signs. "Why didn't you confront him?" Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. What was I supposed to say? "Honey, are you sleeping with your co-worker?" He would have denied it, gotten better at hiding it, and I'd have looked like a paranoid wife. "So, what do you want to do about it?" She looked up at me then, and I saw something fierce and determined in her eyes. "I want them to pay, both of them." The second call was to Derek Morrison, Vanessa's boss at the real estate agency. Derek was a bottom-line kind of guy who cared more about profits than personalities. I'd done some architectural work for his company a few years back, designing their new office building. "Lucas, good to hear from you. How's business?" "Could be better, Derek. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I wanted to give you a heads up about something that might affect your agency." "What kind of something?" "The kind that involves employees using company time and resources for personal activities. The kind that could expose you to liability issues if the wrong people found out." Derek's tone sharpened immediately. "What are you talking about?" "Vanessa's been conducting personal business during work hours, hotel meetings, restaurant visits, all while claiming to show properties to clients. I've got documentation if you're interested." "Send it over," Derek said without hesitation. "I'll look into it immediately." The third call was the most satisfying. Julia Martinez was Vanessa's sister-in-law, married to her brother, and the biggest gossip in 3 counties. If you wanted information to spread like a virus, Julia was your patient zero. "Lucas, honey, how are you doing? I heard about you and Vanessa. I'm so sorry." "Thanks, Julia. Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something. You know how people are talking, making up stories about what happened? I thought maybe you could help set the record straight." "Of course. What do you want people to know?" I spent 20 minutes feeding Julia carefully crafted details about Vanessa's affair, Ethan's marriage, and the web of lies that had been spun to cover it all up. By the time I hung up, I knew the truth would be spreading through town like wildfire. That evening, I drove to Kyle's gym for the first time in months. My body ached from years of desk work and emotional stress, but I needed to rebuild more than just my reputation. I needed to rebuild myself. "Look what the cat dragged in," Kyle said when he saw me. "Thought you might show up eventually. I need to get back in fighting shape." "Fighting shape for what?" I wrapped my hands and approached the heavy bag. "For whatever comes next." The first punch sent shockwaves up my arm, but it felt good. The second felt better. By the 10th, I was remembering why I'd loved boxing in the first place. It wasn't about violence. It was about control, discipline, and channeling rage into something productive. "Feel better?" Kyle asked after I'd beaten the bag senseless for 20 minutes. "Getting there." My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "What did you say to my boss? He wants to see me first thing Monday morning." I smiled and typed back, "I told him the truth. Isn't that what you wanted?" Her response came immediately. "You're destroying my life." "No," I replied. "I'm just returning the favor." Monday morning brought the first fruits of my labor. Derek Morrison called Vanessa into his office at 9 a.m. sharp, armed with the documentation I'd provided and a growing concern about liability issues. I knew this because Jennifer Blackwood had become an unexpected ally in our mutual quest for justice. She'd started monitoring Ethan's calls and texts, feeding me information about his panic over the investigation into Vanessa's activities. "Derek's furious," Jennifer reported during our coffee meeting Tuesday morning. "Ethan says Vanessa might get fired if she can't explain all those hotel receipts and fake client meetings." What about Ethan? Is his job safe? For now. But Derek's watching him closely. One more scandal, and he's out too. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd planned, but I wasn't satisfied yet. Vanessa still had allies, people who believed her version of events. Samantha was still spreading stories about my controlling behavior and unstable mental state. The narrative needed to change more dramatically. That's when I learned about the charity gala. Every year, our town's business community gathered for a fundraising dinner at the high school gymnasium. It was the social event of the season, where deals were made, reputations were built or destroyed, and everyone who mattered showed up to see and be seen. This year's theme was Building Our Future Together. Ironic, considering I was about to demolish several futures in one evening. I bought a ticket and began planning the most important presentation of my career. Wednesday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Samantha Torres stood in my doorway, looking nervous and angry in equal measure. "We need to talk," she said. "By all means, come in. Make yourself comfortable." She perched on the edge of a chair like a bird ready to take flight. "You need to stop this crusade against Vanessa. You're destroying an innocent woman." I laughed, and the sound seemed to echo off the walls of my cluttered office. "Innocent?" "Samantha, she's been cheating on me for months. You've been helping her. How exactly does that make either of you innocent?" "Marriage is complicated, Lucas. You don't understand what Vanessa was going through." "Then enlighten me." Samantha shifted uncomfortably. She felt trapped, unloved. You worked all the time, never talked to her, never showed her any affection. She was fading inside that marriage. So instead of talking to me about it, instead of suggesting counseling or separation, she decided to sleep with Ethan Blackwood, and you decided to help her do it. She needed support. She needed a divorce lawyer, not a pimp. Samantha's face went white with rage. "How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth, hold people accountable for their actions. I'm not the villain in this story, Samantha. I'm just the only one with enough integrity to call it what it is." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't over, Lucas. Vanessa has friends, people who care about her. We won't let you destroy her life over a mistake." "A mistake?" I stood up too, towering over her. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is being late for dinner. Carrying on an affair for months while lying to your husband's face isn't a mistake. It's a choice, and choices have consequences." After Samantha left, I returned to my computer and began crafting the PowerPoint presentation that would change everything. Photos, screenshots, credit card records, location data, all arranged in a timeline that told the complete story of Vanessa's betrayal. I titled it, The Architecture of Deception. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies. The high school gymnasium had been transformed into something resembling elegance, with round tables, white linens, and a stage where local dignitaries would speak about community values and moral leadership. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the confident smile of a man about to deliver the performance of his lifetime. Vanessa was already there, stunning in a black cocktail dress, working the room like the professional she was. She'd always been good at networking, at making people like her. Tonight, that skill would work against her. Ethan stood near the bar, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. He kept glancing around the room nervously, as if expecting trouble. Smart man. He wouldn't have to wait long. I made my way to the AV booth, where Tommy Chen, a kid I'd hired for summer work, was managing the sound and projection systems. "Mr. Mitchell, good to see you. You here for the presentations?" "Actually, Tommy, I am giving a presentation. Mind if I set up my laptop?" "Sure thing. What's your topic?" "Community values," I said, "and the importance of honesty in our personal relationships." At 8:30, after dinner had been served and the wine had flowed freely, the evening's program began. The mayor spoke about economic development. The school superintendent talked about educational excellence. Then, the master of ceremonies announced the final speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome local architect Lucas Mitchell, who will be speaking about integrity in our community. I walked to the podium with steady steps, my laptop connected to the projection system, my presentation loaded and ready. The audience settled into polite attention, wine glasses in hand, expecting another boring speech about civic responsibility. Thank you all for coming tonight, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium. I want to talk to you about something that affects every person in this room: the importance of truth in our relationships, both personal and professional. I clicked to the first slide, a photo of Vanessa and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful and completely unaware of what the future held. 15 years ago, I made a commitment to honor and cherish one person above all others. I believed that commitment was mutual. Tonight, I want to share with you what happens when that trust is broken. The next slide showed Vanessa and Ethan at Chez Laurent, leaning across the table toward each other, their body language unmistakably intimate. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw Vanessa's face go pale, saw Ethan start to rise from his seat. This photo was taken 3 weeks ago, I continued, during what my wife claimed was a business meeting with a difficult client. Click. Hotel receipts. Click. Credit card statements. Click. Text messages between Vanessa and Ethan, their words of passion and deception projected 20 feet high for everyone to see. I'm not going to report on where I spend my time, I read aloud, Vanessa's own words echoing through the gymnasium. That was my wife's response when I asked about her whereabouts, and she was right. There was no need for her to report. The evidence spoke for itself. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were silent, transfixed by the unfolding drama. I saw people pulling out their phones, recording the presentation, sharing it in real time with friends who hadn't attended. But the story doesn't end with adultery, I said, advancing to the next slide. It continues with a campaign of character assassination designed to make the victim appear to be the villain. More screenshots. Samantha's social media posts about my controlling behavior. Ethan's comments to mutual friends about my instability. A web of lies designed to justify the unjustifiable. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the architecture of deception, a carefully constructed narrative built on betrayal, supported by lies, and designed to destroy an innocent man's reputation while the guilty parties escape consequences. I clicked to the final slide, a photo of Vanessa, Ethan, and Samantha, together at a restaurant, laughing and celebrating, while I sat at home, wondering why my wife had grown so distant. These are the people who lecture others about community values while destroying families for their own selfish desires. These are the people who demand your trust while proving themselves utterly untrustworthy. I closed the laptop and looked out at the stunned audience. Vanessa was crying, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her cheeks. Ethan had his head in his hands. Samantha was staring at me with pure hatred. "Thank you for your attention," I said. "And remember, in architecture, as in life, a structure is only as strong as its foundation. Build on lies, and everything eventually comes crashing down." I walked off the stage to absolute silence, packed up my laptop, and headed for the exit. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping, voices rising, the sound of a community's social order reshuffling itself in real time. In the parking lot, Ethan caught up with me, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You snake," he snarled. "You just destroyed 3 people's lives for your own sick revenge." I turned to face him, and he must have seen something in my expression that made him take a step back. "I didn't destroy anything," I said quietly. "I just revealed what was already there. You destroyed your own life the moment you decided my wife was worth more than your integrity. This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You're going to leave town, Ethan. You're going to take your wife and kids somewhere far away from here, and you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to rebuild what you threw away. Because if you stay, If you try to salvage your reputation here, I will make tonight look like a friendly conversation." He started to say something else, but I stepped closer, and the words faded in his throat. "Leave," I repeated. "Tonight." He left. The call came at 11:30 that night, just as I was pouring myself a celebratory whiskey and admitting that revenge tasted even better than I'd imagined. "Lucas, it's Jennifer. You need to know. Ethan's not leaving town. He's planning something." I set down my glass, suddenly alert. "What kind of something?" "He's been on the phone for hours, calling everyone he knows, trying to put together some kind of counterattack. He's convinced Samantha and Vanessa to meet him tomorrow night. They're planning to turn this around somehow, make you look like the crazy one." "Where are they meeting?" "The old Riverside construction site. You know, where they were building that shopping complex before the funding fell through. Ethan thinks it's symbolic, says he's going to construct a new narrative about what really happened." I almost laughed. Even in defeat, Ethan couldn't resist a dramatic gesture, but this wasn't over. It was an opportunity. "Jennifer, how would you like to see this finished once and for all?" "What do you have in mind?" "Meet me tomorrow at 7. And bring a camera." The Riverside construction site had been abandoned for 2 years, ever since the developer ran out of money and left behind a skeleton of concrete and steel that looked like the bones of some massive prehistoric creature. It was the perfect place for a final confrontation, isolated, dramatic, and filled with the kind of symbolism that would make this story legendary in our small town. I arrived first, parking my truck behind a pile of construction materials where it wouldn't be seen from the main access road. Jennifer pulled up 5 minutes later, looking nervous but determined. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Trust me. By the end of tonight, your husband will be begging you for forgiveness, my wife will be signing divorce papers without argument, and Samantha will be looking for a new town to spread her poison in." I'd spent the day setting up my final gambit. Hidden cameras positioned around the site, connected to a live streaming setup that would broadcast everything to a private social media account I'd created. The guest list included everyone who'd been at the charity gala, plus their friends, family members, and anyone else who might be interested in the conclusion of our little drama. At 8 o'clock, headlights appeared at the entrance to the construction site. Vanessa's car, followed by Ethan's BMW and Samantha's SUV. They parked near the half-finished building and got out, looking around nervously. "Lucas!" Vanessa called out. "We know you're here. We need to talk." I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, my hands visible and empty. No weapons, no threats, just a man ready to finish what others had started. "Talk away," I said. "But you should know, we have an audience tonight." I held up my phone, showing them the live stream that was already attracting viewers. The comment section was filling up with messages from people who'd seen my presentation at the gala and were eager for the next chapter. "You're insane," Samantha said. "This has gone too far." "Has it? You 3 conspired to destroy my marriage, ruin my reputation, and isolate me from my community. All I've done is tell the truth about it. If that seems insane to you, maybe you should examine your own behavior." Ethan stepped forward, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "We're here to make you an offer, Lucas, a truce. We'll all agree to stop the public attacks, stop the social media wars, and handle this privately like adults." "What's your definition of privately?" "Vanessa will agree to a quiet divorce with fair asset division. I'll transfer to our company's office in another state. Samantha will stop talking about the situation entirely. In exchange, you stop the public humiliation campaign." I pretended to consider the offer while watching the viewer count on my live stream climb toward 300. Half the town was watching this unfold in real time. "That's an interesting proposal," I said, "but it has one fatal flaw." "Which is?" "It assumes I want this to stop." I pulled out a second phone and began reading from the screen. "These are text messages between Ethan and Samantha from 6 months ago. Apparently, your conspiracy goes deeper than anyone realized." Vanessa spun around to stare at her best friend. What is he talking about? Samantha and Ethan have been sleeping together too, I announced, both to the group and to my live audience. Your best friend and your lover, Vanessa. They've been laughing at you behind your back while you thought you were all allies. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. Vanessa launched herself at Samantha, screaming accusations and profanity. Samantha fought back, their carefully styled hair and expensive clothes quickly becoming disheveled in the dirt of the construction site. Ethan tried to separate them, which only resulted in both women turning on him. The livestream chat was going crazy, viewers sharing the feed with friends, the audience growing by the dozens every minute. "Stop!" I shouted, and something in my voice made all three of them freeze. "You want to know what really happened here? You want the truth?" I walked closer, my voice carrying clearly in the night air and through the phone speakers of hundreds of viewers. Samantha orchestrated this entire affair, I said. She's been manipulating both Vanessa and Ethan from the beginning, feeding Vanessa's dissatisfaction with our marriage, while encouraging Ethan's midlife crisis. She wanted to destroy both our marriages so she could swoop in and pick up the pieces. "That's not true," Samantha protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? You've been in love with Ethan for years, haven't you? Ever since he started working at the real estate agency. But he was married and you were Vanessa's friend, so you couldn't make a direct move. Instead, you decided to eliminate the competition." I pulled out printed copies of text messages, emails, and social media interactions I'd uncovered during my investigation. You encouraged Vanessa to feel neglected and unappreciated. You suggested she deserved better. You introduced her to the idea that having an affair might be justified. And when she finally took the bait, you made sure she chose Ethan. Vanessa was staring at Samantha with growing horror. "Is this true? And you," I turned to Ethan, "were so flattered by the attention of two women that you never stopped to think about why it was happening. You thought you were the puppet master, but you were just another puppet." The live stream had over 500 viewers now. Comments were flying past faster than anyone could read them, but the general sentiment was clear. The audience was fascinated by this real-time destruction of 3 lives. "But here's the beautiful part," I continued. "While you were all busy betraying each other, you gave me everything I needed to destroy you completely, and I didn't have to break a single law to do it." I gestured toward Ethan's BMW. "That car is going to be repossessed next week. Turns out when your employer discovers you've been using company resources for personal affairs, they tend to demand immediate repayment of your company car allowance, plus interest." Ethan's face went white. "You can't prove." "I already did. Derek Morrison has a complete record of every hotel room you charged to the company credit card, every restaurant meal you claimed as a business expense while you were actually seducing my wife. The accounting department is very thorough when they smell fraud." I turned to Vanessa. "And you're going to discover that adultery is still grounds for an unfavorable divorce settlement in this state, especially when it can be proven that you used marital assets to fund your affair. Those hotel rooms, those dinners, those gifts you bought for Ethan, all paid for with our joint credit cards." Finally, I faced Samantha. "And you're going to find that being the orchestrator of this conspiracy makes you legally liable for alienation of affection." "That's right. I can sue you for destroying my marriage. And I will." The 3 of them stood there in the dirt and debris of the abandoned construction site, their alliance shattered, their reputations destroyed, their futures uncertain. Around us, the skeletal remains of the unfinished building cast long shadows in the moonlight, a perfect metaphor for the ruins of their carefully constructed deceptions. "This is your choice," I said, addressing all 3 of them and the hundreds of people watching the live stream. "You can keep fighting, keep lying, keep trying to salvage something from this wreckage, or you can accept that your actions have consequences and try to rebuild your lives somewhere else, with whatever integrity you have left." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called in a disturbance, probably one of the live stream viewers who was concerned about the situation escalating into violence. "Looks like our time is up," I said. "But don't worry, this has all been recorded for posterity. Future generations will be able to study this as a perfect example of how betrayal, manipulation, and moral cowardice ultimately destroy themselves." I walked back to my truck, leaving the three conspirators standing in the ruins of their own making. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa sobbing, Ethan cursing, and Samantha trying desperately to explain herself to people who no longer trusted a word she said. The police arrived as I was driving away, but I wasn't worried. I hadn't broken any laws, hadn't made any threats, hadn't laid a finger on anyone. I'd simply told the truth in a public place, and if that was enough to destroy 3 people's lives, then their lives weren't built on very solid foundations to begin with. My phone buzzed with notifications, hundreds of comments, shares, and messages from people who'd watched the live stream. The story was spreading beyond our small town now, shared on social media platforms across the country. Vanessa, Ethan, and Samantha were about to become infamous. I drove home through empty streets, past the high school where I'd delivered my presentation, past the restaurant where I'd first confronted the affair, past all the landmarks of a marriage that had ended long before I'd admitted it to myself. At home, I poured myself that whiskey I'd been interrupted from drinking, sat down at my drafting table, and began sketching plans for a new house. Something clean and modern, built on solid ground, designed to last. My phone rang. It was Jennifer Blackwood. "It's over," she said simply. "Yes, it is. Ethan's packing. He'll be gone by morning. Good for him, and good for you. What about you, Lucas? What happens now?" I looked around my office, at the blueprints and drawings that represented years of work, at the empty whiskey bottles that represented months of pain, at the computer screen still showing comments from people who'd witnessed the final destruction of my marriage. "Now I build something new," I said. "Something better." After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my house and realized that for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. The anger was gone, burned away in the fire of perfectly executed revenge. The hurt was still there, but it was manageable now. Just another scar to add to the collection that every adult accumulates over the years. I'd started this journey as Lucas the betrayed husband, transformed into Lucas the avenging angel, and emerged as something else entirely, Lucas the architect of his own destiny. They'd called me cold. They'd called me cruel. They'd called me unstable and controlling and dangerous.